Stay with me here. If you're looking for a solo build for the Elder Scrolls Online that combines insane AoE damage potential with a lot of flexibility in terms of healing, resource sustain, and shields without needing monster sets or trials gear, then all you need to know is one word. Alright everybody, here we are back on the Stamina Templar with an updated solo build moving into update 37. This is actually one of my favorites that I've played so far. Tons of versatility, very easy to survive in any solo content. So lots to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump into the basic stats first of all. So with just our basic buffs, you can see we're sitting at about 13,000 max magicka, 24k max health, about 30k max stamina, good recoveries overall, over 2,000 stam recovery. But our damage and crit chance does go up quite a bit when we're more fully buffed, so let's go ahead and do that. We do have a back bar, weapon damage, enchant, a couple of abilities that we'll want to use here. And there you can see the full potential, about 6,200 spell damage, 44% crit chance. And we are using spell damage, by the way, because of the Templar's minor sorcery passives. And that's actually much easier to deal with in update 37. We'll talk about the new glyphs that you can use in this update, which are just really simplify things, which is awesome. Obviously, as a stamina-focused Templar, we're going to dump everything into stamina here, 64 points. In terms of the food, you will want something probably with a mixture of health, stamina, and stamina recovery. I'm using Artaeum Takeaway Broth. If you don't want to spend the gold on that, then Dubious Cameron Throne will be totally fine. On this setup, I definitely recommend that. And depending on your race, you could even do Lava Foot Soup if you feel like you have enough health. But for me personally, I like having the more health, the better, I think, on a solo build. It does help a lot with this build too in terms of the damage shields, shield scaling, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Mundus Stone, a couple of really good options. I would recommend Lover Mundus, primarily if you're focused on solo gameplay with this build. Of course, you can also use the Thief Mundus for that extra crit chance bonus. That's going to be very powerful on any Templar build. That's going to help a lot with group gameplay as well. That tends to scale the best, and it's sort of best in overall situations for this build. Now for race, I don't want to give you just one, preferred option. I'm going to give you a list of options, which I think would be very good in this particular setup. So for the Stamina Templar, anything that has stats and sustain is what you're going to want. So for me, I chose Imperial. I know that's not an option for everybody, but for me, this was a nice balance because you get the max health, you get the max stamina, and you get cost reduction of all your abilities by 6%. This is especially useful since we're combining, magicka and stamina abilities, although most of them are stam. It makes it very easy to sustain on this particular build when you are solo. Now that's just easy mode. If you want more damage and you're okay with your sustain, then feel free to go with, Dark Elf or Orc or even High Elf, Khajiit for that matter. All of those damage-focused races are going to play really well on any Templar solo build. You already have the survivability, you have the healing through, your class skills, so feel free to pump up the damage. Like I said, choice is totally yours, but Imperial is really fun to play on this particular setup. Finally, in terms of potions, basic stamina potions or magicka potions, completely fine. If you want to mix them both with a tri-stat potion, that's going to be pretty good for more difficult content, as this does buff all of our recoveries. I think that's the basics, so we can go ahead and jump into the gear sets next. Starting with our first 5-piece set, and I went with a defensive set with this particular setup. Again, focused on solo gameplay, even veteran solo arenas. Having a little bit of extra protection goes a long way. And so Hexo Sword being an overland set, very easy to pick up. And a great way to increase your survivability. This gives you an automatic damage shield anytime we do critical damage, which is pretty much all the time. So you'll have a very strong uptime with this shield. That does get buffed by our champion points, by the way. And the 2 through 4-piece bonuses are pretty good as well. So if you're looking for, the ultimate easy mode setup, that's definitely what we've got here. damage shields for the win, in other words. We actually have, let me see, I think 3 total shields on this particular build. So those all stack, giving us well over, our full health pool with damage shields, which is really nice. Now, since this is an overland set, I decided to go with weapons. I figure, you can buy those yourself. You can farm those. However you want to pick those up, I think that would be the easiest option. And we're going with dual wield here, so I've got double daggers. That, of course, is good for the weapon damage passives, especially extra critical chance. We've got 1 Nerdhoned, 1 charged, with the flame damage and the poison damage glyphs, respectively. So that's going to cover 2 bonuses, and then third bonus is going to come from the belt. Again, this is a medium armor set, so medium here, stamina, divines as the trait if you can get it. Then just 2 additional pieces from the jewelry, so our 4th and 5th piece bonus come from here. Notice I did put 1 extra stamina recovery glyph. That is optional. You could put a damage glyph here if you want. We have tons of options for sustain on this build, but in a single target fight, those are a little bit more limited, so the extra recovery does come in handy, like I said, but go ahead and play around with that and see what works best for you. That'll also depend on your race. Now, I did mention the new damage glyphs coming in Update 37. These are really good for Templar because you can see whichever one you choose. This is a physical harm glyph. You can also get the magic harm glyph. Both of those now give the weapon and spell damage bonus together. So that basically means you can run any one of these on a Templar and you'll still get a higher spell damage stat, which is what we want because Templars have access to minor sorcery, which is an additional buff to spell damage. Now, if you're setting up this build before Update 37 hits, then I do recommend spell damage glyphs. Even though this is a Stamina Templar build, you do want to go with spell damage just to buff that minor sorcery. Okay, second 5-piece set is going to be our offensive set. This, of course, is Deadly Strike, probably the best Templar set in the game. Still is at this point, so you definitely want to use it. You can see you get some weapon and spell damage bonuses, crit chance as a bonus, and then increases the damage of your damage over time and channeled abilities by 15%. This, of course, is going to buff our main spammable skill, Biting Jabs, which is a channeled skill. All of our other skills are essentially dots on this build, so they will get buffed as well. Pretty much everything gets buffed by this, so it is a win-win to use on the Stamina Templar. Now, I actually recommend getting body pieces if you've never gotten this set before. Those will be much cheaper than trying to get weapons, for example. So you can run, the boots, the legs, hands. I've got chest and a helmet. So those are my 5 pieces of Deadly Strike. Those are all medium armor pieces, max stamina as the enchant, and then divines as the trait. 1 leftover piece on the body where you have room for a 1-piece monster set bonus. So Slimecraw is going to be ideal there for the little bit extra critical chance you can get from that. I also went with Light here with a bit of Magicka as the glyph just to sort of balance out my stats and my armor passives. I do recommend at least 1 light piece from your monster set. That does help. And then you might have caught it down here in the jewelry. We are using a mythic of your choice. I prefer the Ring of the Pale Order for most solo content. That's because you get that massive chunk of healing back. 20% of the damage you deal comes back as health. So this is super effective on the Templar with all of the dots and everything that we're doing. Tons of damage skills, so you get tons of passive healing back. Basically lets us not run a burst heal. We have, essentially no healing other than passive healing on this build, which seems like a challenge, but it actually works perfectly. Of course, if you want to be a little bit more damage focused, you could use something else. Sea Serpent's Coil is one of my favorites. You will lack a little bit in the healing department, but if you are, playing with a companion, for example, or playing more with groups, you will want a more damage-focused mythic, so just keep that in mind. Last but not least, your back bar weapon is up to you. Now, for the most survivability, I would double bar the Hexos Ward set. Obviously, you can wear Hexos Ward on your body if you prefer. You can front bar Deadly Strike. There's lots of different combinations here. But for the most balanced, you kind of want to have both sets active at all times, regardless of which skill bar you're using. So really easy way to do that is just pick up a Hexos Ward 2-handed weapon. Could be the Greatsword, could be the Maul, could be an axe. Whichever you prefer there. Just make sure you get an infused trait with the weapon and spell damage glyph to maximize your damage. So that is the setup. Again, I've tried to keep it super easy, simple on this particular build. Hexos Ward, Deadly Strike, 1 piece of Slimecraw, and then your Mythic. Now, as always, I will have alternate set options listed on the website with a written guide I'll have a link to that in the description and the pinned comment if you want to check that out. I'll have more options there for greater damage, greater survivability, and I also have all the gear slots listed out by slot, so it's very easy to reference, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested. That said, let's jump right into the skills here, starting on the dual wield front bar. Deadly Cloak is going to be our first skill. That's from the dual wield skill line. This feels really good on Templar. We're already very tanky with some of our passives and the healing that we get, but this gives us an extra bonus defensive buff. This is major evasion for 20 seconds, reducing damage from area attacks by 20%. Feels really good in solo arenas where, you have lots of AoE effects coming around you. And it does damage at the same time, AoE damage in fact. So it's a great combination of an offensive and a defensive skill. Feels really good, like I said, on the Stamina Templar. Now we're combining that with something from the Templar toolkit for Sustain. And this is the Repentance skill, which comes from the Restoring Light skill tree. That's the third ability here. This gives you a heal and restore stamina when you kill enemies. The great thing about this too is it is free to cast, and all you need to do is have corpses on the ground. So this is really sort of your clutch heal. You want to think about when you use this, not use it all the time. For example, you want to stack the bodies for this to get the most effectiveness out of it. So if, let's say you're in an arena, don't use this after every enemy. I would say, after you kill 3 or 4 enemies, reserve this skill for that time when when your stamina is going down, when maybe you've taken some damage. Pop this and all of a sudden you've got, 12,000 health back and 12,000 stamina back. You're back to full on your 2 main resources. So I do really like that about the Stamina Templar. One of the reasons why it's one of my favorite solo builds is you can be really strategic with the use of Repentance. Not only that, you get some great passives. All the minor buffs are here. Minor Fortitude, Minor Endurance, Minor Intellect. So that's 15% extra recovery for all of those. Really nice on the front bar. Next up, we got Barb Trap. That's, of course, from the Fighters Guild skill line. You will want this, especially for the dot effect, single target dot, as well as Minor Force. So that's an additional 10% critical damage done. Make sure you keep this up at all times. Then, of course, our main DPS skill. Still great on the Stamina Templar. That's Biting Jabs. Keep in mind, this was recently changed to give your major brutality and major sorcery buffs. And those have a 10-second duration. So you will want to make sure that you are using Biting Jabs at least once every 10 seconds. So if you're, coming from a long back bar rotation, the first thing you want to cast is Biting Jabs to get that major damage buff. And you'll also want to cast that before, going into combat to buff that skill as well. You don't need a target to make that buff active. You can do it anytime. Next up is Radiant Ward. This comes from the Adric Spear skill line, and it's my favorite tool on this build for survivability. Now, you can actually use both versions. There's 2 different morphs of this. One does more damage. One gives you bigger damage shields. So I went with the damage shield morph here. You can see it gives me about 8,000 damage shield at base. But each enemy that I hit with this, it does upfront damage, by the way, increases the shield strength by 20%. So if I hit 5 enemies, if I've got a lot of adds around me, 5 of them, the shield strength is basically doubled. So again, you want to reserve this for when you're getting attacked by multiple enemies. If you just use it once, I have Hexos Ward here, so you can see I have a huge shield. But if you just use it once, it's pretty small, right? With just one enemy around you. So you will want to wait until you have as many enemies as possible. Go ahead and pop that shield, and its huge survivability makes it really easy to tank through, really difficult boss encounters and tons of enemies, so it's great for a solo build. And finally, our ultimate skill here, Flawless Dawnbreaker. That's from the Fighters Guild skill line. Just a great option for overall damage. Does buff your damage stats as well. Great passives from this skill line, so yeah, definitely pick that up. Back bar, let's talk about our two-handed skill line. We've got Stampede here. This is great for many reasons. 1, for the gap closer, really helps with mobility, especially in arenas. 2, this is one of the easiest ways to proc that back bar weapon damage and spell damage glyph. So you want to use this on cooldown. And then 3, this does an insane amount of damage over time to enemies in the area. So you can see with the exception of, Barb Trap, every single skill on this build is AoE damage. It damages multiple enemies at once. That is why this build is so good, in my opinion, is it just mows through things. It goes through enemies like butter. Of course, we're combining that with Carve. Carve is also from the two-handed skill line. You can see those skills here. Carve is our AoE damage over time effect. This does stack up to 3 times for a 32-second duration. And remember, this also gives you a damage shield on your back bar. When you cast this, you get about 6,500 extra shield there. So like I said, about 3 shields combined when you do all of your shields. So here's Carve. Get Hexos Ward to proc, and our Radiant Ward. We are probably close to, 30k or so in damage shields. That's on demand, right? You can use this anytime you're on the back bar. Just spam it. That's extra shield. That will protect your health bar if you're taking too much damage. So very, very helpful for many reasons. We also have Razor Caltrops here. This is just our another AoE dot, but also Major Breach. So that's going to be important to debuff resistances. And then in addition to that, Reflective Light. Now, I do like having 1 to 2 Magicka-based DPS skills on the Stamina Templar. Reason for that is sustain. You have a Magicka pool that you're not going to be using, unless you're taking damage. If you're taking damage, you're going to use Radiant Ward. But if you're not, you need to do something with that magic. So something from the Dawn's Wrath skill line, either Reflective Light or Solar Barrage. These are really good options. Now, you can do the single target morph of this skill called Vampire's Bane. That's very good as well. But I just figured Reflective Light is more useful in more situations because it does hit up to 3 enemies. But here's the thing. This skill also gives us Major Savagery and Major Prophecy. So that's going to give us, our spell crit and physical crit buff, which is very important on this build. It gives you more options for potions, basically. And you get the Dawn's Wrath passive Illuminate, which is our minor sorcery buff from using any of those skills. So we're getting multiple bonuses in one. We're getting our crit bonus. We're getting our 10% bonus spell damage. Got a Magicka-based skill, so it's helping with sustain. It just does so much on this particular build, so I really like it. Definitely check that out. And then last but not least here are defensive buff Restoring Focus. That comes from this Restoring Light skill line. Last skill here, this is our Major Resolve, so that's your armor skill. Plus you get a very nice heal from standing in this. That can crit too, obviously, and it's healing you back every 1 second, so it's very nice. Backbar ultimate is up to you. You can use something for a big burst of damage. I like Shooting Star myself. That's because this has a stun. Does AoE damage over time, so that is going to be buffed by Deadly Strike. And we get ultimate back, so this is great. If you have, a lot of enemies in the area, you're going to be back to full ultimate much, much quicker. Okay, so that is the setup. Let's go ahead and go over a quick rotation just to kind of show you how this works. So as I said, you do want to buff your major damage buff with Biting Jabs beforehand, just to get that going. Then go ahead and buff your rune on the back bar and then all of your dots. So we've got Stampede, Carve, here's Razor Caltrops, Reflective Light. Then you want to do another Carve there, just to buff that with a little bit longer duration. So again, that's Biting Jabs first. Make sure your rune is on the ground for the healing and sustain. Stampede, Carve, Caltrops, and Reflective Light. And bar swap to the front. You want to do Biting Jabs again, just to refresh that damage buff. And then our 2 front bar dots, Deadly Strike and Barb Trap, followed by 4 to 5 jabs on the front bar. By that time, your dot should be wearing off. You can go ahead and refresh those on the back. Make sure you buff your rune as well. Stay in that. You can use your ultimate if that's ready. And front bar again, jabs, deadly, and barb trap, and then into jabs. And you just really want to watch your buff timers. I've got the buff timers set up so I can see when things have expired and then refresh them at that point. Make sure you do refresh Carve every other rotation. If you miss it, it's okay, but it's going to go back to 0 stacks. And you have to do it like 2 times or so to get it back to full again. Use your front bar ultimate when that's ready. So here you can see I can skip Carve because it has enough time. Deadly Cloak, Barb Trap, 4 to 5 jabs. Watching my timers, I see Carve's about to go down, so I'll refresh that this time. along with everything else on the back bar. And then remember to use your ward if you need it for the protection. And again, as soon as enemies die, you'll want to use that repentance to get your sustain back. Again, if you'd like to see more on that, check the written guide. I'll have the rotation written down. I'll have all the skills and alternate options listed there. Let's talk about champion points here quickly in the green tree. This is pretty much what I recommend for most of my builds. Treasure Hunter, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency, and Steed's Blessing. For the blue tree, the main slotted stars are Thaumaturge, Master at Arms, Binding Aura, and Binding Finesse. Also, you want to make sure to prioritize some of your passives, particularly those in Staving Death. These are the best for survivability, especially if you're solo. I'm talking about Quick Recovery and especially Preparation. That's 10% damage reduction. This is huge, combined with Hardy and Elemental Aegis if you have enough CP for those. Then in the red tree, pretty simple here. You do want to prioritize your recovery, so Rejuvenation. Prioritize your health pool, so Boundless Vitality. I do recommend Bastion here. It might be a little bit overdone, to be honest. But if you're a newer player, you will want to pick this up because that's 15% additional shield size. It's going to help a ton with survivability. And then the fourth one I would recommend would be Bloody Renewal for the Stamina Sustain. And if you're curious about the outfit style, we have the Ascendant Order. For my body pieces on this build, it's a mix of the light helmet style combined with the medium style for all the other body pieces. Everybody, just a quick note that if you enjoyed this video, we have even more unique and off-meta solo builds you can watch right now as part of our Elite Squad membership right here on YouTube. Like our updated Vampire Magicka Templar build with over 13,000 spell damage to take your Vampire builds to the next level. We've got tons of other members-only content, including builds, and also early access to content and members-only Discord, so there's something here for everyone. If that sounds good to you, just click that join button down below for more information. And huge shout out, by the way, to our current channel members who make HTM possible. I could not do this without you, so thanks again. Thanks to all of you for watching this video, and I will see you around in the next one.